Hello and welcome back to Let's Play Civilization 3. Went ahead and started the game, and what the game starts you off with is a settler unit and a worker unit. And the first thing you'll do is you'll use the settler unit to plop down your first city on whatever location you're starting in. You can then check out your city and see what it's doing, and you'll notice quite a few things. First of all, you'll notice that you have a production rate in the city, and it's measured in shields. Persepolis is building has 2 shields per turn, and that determines how quickly you can build units and improvements. You also have food production. It takes 2 food per worker in the city, or per civilian in the city, and each civilian can work 1 square in the city's area. Any extra food is put into storage, and once the storage bar is filled up, it's then emptied out, and a new civilian is added to your population. The wealth of the city, generates is split between the treasury, your research, and entertainment for your citizens at a rate that you determine in the advisor's view, which I'll show you later. You also see the garrison in the city, pollution being generated, any luxuries available, any improvements built here. Here we just have the palace, which represents the capital. You have the strategic resources, a bit of general information about the city, and the culture rate of the city, which also determines the borders. You can also click on the city view button to get a little panoramic view of your city, and all the improvements and wonders you build will appear here. After that, what you're going to want to do is, on your first turn, send your worker around to start developing the land. Now, there's quite a few things we can see here, and first thing you need to know about territory is that they produce resources at different rates. Grassland produces 2 food. Plains produce one food and 1 shield. Now, what you're going to want to have is you probably want at least every square to produce at least 2 food. The reason for this is 2 food is how much each civilian needs to survive, so you want each civilian to be self-sustaining whenever it is possible. So what you want to do is build irrigation on plains. Irrigation is, of course, like little water ducts that makes the square more productive towards food production. It adds 1 food in most squares that it can be built. Grassland, on the other hand, already produces 2 food, so you can build mines there to increase the production by 1 shield. You could also have things added onto the squares, like grassland can be bonus grassland, which generates an additional shield. Likewise, you can also have things like wheat added onto squares. Wheat adds 2 food to whatever square it's on. Fortunately, because we're under despotism, there's a limit to how much of any one type of resource a square can produce. So while this plains has a potential of 3 food, even with nothing on it but the wheat, we only get 2 food from it because we're under despotism. So that's an unfortunate reality, but nothing we can do about that for the time being. There's other types of terrain as well, like hills, which generate 1 food and 1 shield, and mountains, which generate no food and 1 shield. Different terrain reacts differently to different improvements. Likewise, you can't build all types of improvements on all types of terrain. For example, you can't irrigate mountains or hills. You can only build mines there, but mines are especially effective on mountains. They, I believe, add an additional 2 shields rather than just 1. Over here we also see a floodplain, and what a floodplain is, it's basically a desert square that's next to a river. And all squares next to a river generate 1 additional gold, but if a desert square is next to a river square, it becomes a floodplain square. And desert squares by default generate 1 shield, but if they're next to a floodplain, they instead generate 2 food, and building an irrigation there adds an additional 2 food for a total of 4. So floodplains are rather good in that sense if you want a lot of food, but it's quite a distance from our city, and we won't be able to access it with Persepolis for the time being. What we are going to do is we're going to develop this square up here. Now, the reason why I'm developing this square up here and not the square next to the river is because moving across the river and back again will cost us a lot of turns. This is due to the fact that you can build a road across squares to increase the movement rate of your units, but at this early stage of the game, roads don't work across rivers because we don't yet know how to build bridges. So you generally want to avoid crossing rivers whenever possible, but on second thought, now that I think about it, we're probably going to have to waste some movement anyway, So I think I will end up developing this square. It also has an additional gold because it's next to the river. The reason why we're picking this square is because we want to start off by developing the bonus grassland squares, since those are the ones we're going to be using first. The reason for that is bonus grassland squares are better than grassland or plain squares by at least 1 unit, excuse me. So those are the ones you want to start with. Before we end our turn, however, what we're going to do is we're going to head down to our science advisor and we're going to have him start researching pottery. The reason for this is that it lets us build granaries. And the reason why we want granaries is in order to get a good start on the game, you're going to want to build lots of cities up very quickly. And the best way to do that is to have a city dedicated to pumping out settlers. And the thing about settlers is that they cost shields as well as to population of your city. So in order to get settlers out, you also need to have a very high rate of population growth. So unfortunately, what that means is that you're going to need to build a granary in one of your cities. What a granary does is whenever the storage box of food in your city fills up and gives you new population, rather than empty out completely, it instead just empties out partially, as in it only empties half of the storage box, so you get to keep some of the food and the city grows more quickly. So we're going to be building a granary in whatever city we decide to be our dedicated settler producing city. We're then going to go to the domestic advisor and put all of our gold into research to get our technology up faster. So the research time for pottery is reduced to 8 turns from 16. And with that, we're ready to end our first turn. One more thing to note is the label on the city here. You can see there's quite a bit of information. There's the number 1 here, which indicates population. The number 9 next to the name of the city, which indicates that the city is going to grow in 9 turns. And it also lists what the city is building, which happens to be a warrior. And the number next to what it's building is how long before it's going to be finished. The city also has a star next to it, indicating that it's our capital. The first thing we're going to do in this square is we're going to build a road that'll bring 1 additional gold into the city from that square. And if we look up here, we also notice there's a set of dyes set onto this forest. Now what dyes do is they increase the productivity of that square by 1, but they also count as a luxury resource. So if we build a road to them and develop the square they're on, what that'll do for us is it'll bring the luxury into all the cities that are connected to it, and that increases the happiness of the cities. Happiness is important because if the cities become too unhappy, then they go into civil disorder and stop being productive altogether. So you definitely have to keep an eye on happiness throughout the course of the game. Persepolis is going to keep building a warrior, and once it's done, we're going to send him out to start scouting out the terrain around us. And we're also going to keep building another warrior once the first one is done. So we're off to a fairly good start, and the terrain around us seems to be fairly good. So it seems to be a rather good start to our game. And once this worker's finished, you'll notice that the square he's developing is now producing 2 food, 2 shields, and 2 gold, which is a rather productive square. And we're going to send him up to the square up here to develop that one next, I think. Well, actually, yeah, that's where we'll send him. And he'll start to work on that once he gets there. And as you can see, we're covering quite a few bonus grassland squares, which is rather good. So this looks like a good location for our second city. So that's probably where we'll build next. And once Persepolis has finished its second warrior, we're actually going to start work on a settler to build our second city. Like I said, it's very important to get your starting cities out as quickly as possible. And on this turn, Persepolis' borders have also expanded, which revealed a bit more of the map and gives us access to more squares. You'll notice down here is an actual desert square without a river next to it, so it just produces 1 shield. That's unfortunate. And this seems to be an interior lake, so that's all freshwater. Freshwater is important because, number 1, you can only build irrigation next to a square that either has a city adjacent to irrigation, or is adjacent to existing irrigation, or is adjacent to a freshwater source. There are 2 sources of fresh water. One is a river, and one is an interior lake. Fresh water is also important because in order for a city to grow past 6 population on its own, it needs to be on a fresh water source. Our capital's on a river, so it gets to go past 6 on its own without any problems. If you don't have a fresh water source, the city has to build an aqueduct before it can grow past 6 population. And that's something we're going to be encountering later on, but we don't have the technology to build an aqueduct right just yet anyway. So that's not too big of a deal. And if you note down here, the settler is actually going to be done before the city goes up to maximum population. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a spearman first instead, because the settler isn't actually going to finish before the popular city goes up to 3 population, and you need at least 3 population in order to build a settler. Anyway, I'm getting close to the max of the video, so I'll see you next time.